Thanks, Kara. Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's CCAE learning session. It's called Dalhousie Medical Research Foundation's Thankathon, How to Thank Your Donors for $300. My name is John Bruhm. I'm the Manager of Donor Relations with the Dalhousie Medical Research Foundation, and from here on, I'll be referring to it as Dmrf. In another lifetime, I was a rock and roll reporter, but now I've been working in advancement, university advancement for the past 15 years. I'm a crazy cat guy, as you can see over here, and my other favorite things include traveling, using memes and animated GIFs to communicate, and not being in a pandemic. I welcome you to post questions using the chat function during my presentation, but to be honest, I probably won't be stopping to answer them until the end. That's just to ensure that I cover all the bases. Also, just a warning that, like many Maritimers, sometimes I tend to talk a little fast. And I'll try to be mindful of that. But I apologize in advance because, well, that's just what happens. My goal here today is to provide you with an example of how you can engage your donors while also building a culture of gratitude among your stakeholders. What Dmrf has done may not necessarily work for you, but hopefully this initiative will inspire you to start thinking about how you can do something along these lines. The other objectives I'll highlight are to stress the importance of saying thank you with no strings attached. And you'll be hearing a lot about that today. And to remind you that although it's kind of old school, a telephone can be a valuable way to connect with your stakeholders, especially when you're not asking anything of them. Dmrf is located in my hometown of Halifax, Nova Scotia. We're affiliated with Dalhousie University, and for the past 40 years, we've been raising, granting, and stewarding funds to support medical, dental, and health research that's taking place right here in the Maritimes. And there's been some serious global impact as a result. Dmrf has about 18,000 constituents and about 5,000 annual donors, give or take. Most, but not all of them, are located in the Maritime provinces. Now, prior to my starting at Dmrf in 2017, the organization, they really didn't do all that much in terms of widespread stewardship and donor relations, and they had limited social media activity. We really didn't regularly engage with many of our donors beyond sending them our annual publications, and we didn't even have an e-newsletter. That's not to say that we didn't do anything in those areas, but there just wasn't a lot of consistency. So needless to say, my colleagues and I have been working really hard on strategically upping our game in these areas since then. Dmrf's a relatively small shop. There's 14 of us in total. And until fairly recently, our donor relations and stewardship team consisted of me. Fortunately, we're in growth mode. And as of November, I now have an amazing community engagement officer to help me out. And we also have support from 2 fabulous communications and marketing staff. We call ourselves the Fab Four, and we get along incredibly well. It's a really supportive group. The whole Dmrf team it's a little family, and I really enjoy it. In the fall of 2018, I attended a donor relations conference in the United States, where one of the highlights was a presentation by representatives from Worcester Polytechnic Institute in Massachusetts. They told us about their Gratitude Day, where they made a concerted effort to thank and acknowledge their donors in a variety of ways. It really got my creative juices flowing, and with WPI's blessing and a few pointers, I got to planning a similar initiative for Dmrf. Over the next 6 months, I chipped away at the Dmrf Thankathon. Its premise was simple: to show our donors how much we appreciate them by thanking them for their support with absolutely no fundraising component. The latter point was incredibly important to the success of this initiative. The last thing we wanted to do was to try to make people feel special and then ask them to do something or attend something or answer survey questions, or especially to give anything. That's what we call thasking. Any of the disciples of Lynn Wester will be very familiar with the term thasking, which is thanking and then asking. I'm not really sure who the character is on screen, but apparently his name is Thask. It's just what I found when I Googled the word Thask. He kind of looks like what would have happened if Jim Carrey had become an advanced professional in 1994. Either way, it's all bad news. Anyway, the point of our Thankathon was simply to thank our donors, and that's it. And what better way to show the donors some love than to do it on Valentine's Day? So our first Thankathon, that's kind of foreshadowing there, our first one. Maybe that means there's more. But our first Thankathon was scheduled for February 14th of 2019. It was a multi-pronged activity that included the following 5 phases. Number 1 was phase 1. It involved sending a themed e-card to our recent donors with a special link to a brand new 2-minute donor appreciation video that we created especially for this initiative. Number 2 it involved a social media campaign using our Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter accounts, which were fledgling at the time, I will admit, and we'll talk more about that a little later. We implemented some modest 1-day ad campaigns to help boost our posts, and we scheduled a variety of posts to push out throughout the day. Phase 3 involved filming personalized videos for a small selection of our donor households and organizations. Now, to be honest, the recipients were not exclusively major gift prospects or donors with high lifetime giving totals, which was the preference of the organization. But really what I did was identified some people who had supported some specific projects that aligned with Dmrf's current fundraising priorities, and I picked those ones. And these videos averaged just 30 seconds in length. They featured short, personalized messages of gratitude from the recipients of funding, everyone from studentship recipients to Canada Research Chairs. And well, I'll talk about that more later, but I felt really good about who we selected because they really seemed to appreciate it. Phase 4 involved having about 24 Dmrf staff members, board members, researchers, and students placing short thank you calls, mostly from the Dmrf offices. So that's so that we could protect caller privacy, so that if anybody called back, it wouldn't go to somebody's home or office line, it would come directly to us. And also so that we could monitor everyone's progress in real time. That was key. There were a couple people who weren't able to. For example, the dean helped out and he didn't have time to come to our office, but he still made the calls and that was fine. The callers received a short script. And again, they were specifically asked to keep the calls short and sweet and to avoid asking the donors to do anything. We really just wanted them to say thank you and to wish our donors a happy Valentine's Day. Finally, phase 5 was similar to phase 4, except that we hired the university's Phone-A-Thon Center to call a selection of our donors. Now, the Phone-A-Thon Center is the group of students who call alumni and ask for donations. That evening, they used a similar script to our volunteer callers, and unlike their usual role, they were instructed not to solicit donations, even if someone offered. And that did certainly happen. There were a few of our callers that said, they called donors and they said, oh yeah, I want to give you some money, or I've been meaning to call or whatever. We said, no, that's great. Thank you very much. We'll make sure that somebody calls you the next tomorrow, but today we're just calling to say thank you. And that was really important. We wanted people to know that we were just calling to show our appreciation and we'll take care of business later. So our goal was first and foremost to surprise and delight our donors and to make it clear that we are very appreciative of their support of health research excellence taking place at Dal without asking them for anything else at this time. Are you getting tired of hearing me say that yet? Well, I'm really trying to hammer it home. We hoped to be able to connect with 1,000 of them over the phone that day and even more electronically. We also felt it would be a great way to engage our internal stakeholders by giving them an opportunity to express their gratitude. There was a secondary objective, and that was to measure the retention rate of donors who received a Thankathon communication, and we gave it a modest goal of at least 25%. So, how did it go? We'll get to that in a moment. Now, if there's any fans of Big Brother here, I'll go, but first, I'm Julie Chen now. Let's do a poll question. My question for you, and that'll pop up on the screen, I believe, is, does your organization host a Thankathon-esque event? Your options are yes, or we have, but not lately. No, that's why I'm here. No, John just paid me to show up today. And then there's the shruggy. In other words, you're not sure. Please take a moment to select your response. The results are in. Some of you have, just not lately. I paid a few of you. Thanks, Mom. And yeah, okay, so there's a variety of responses. That's cool, excellent. Well, thanks for taking time to weigh in on that one. And were there any questions that need to be asked immediately, or shall we hold those off until later, Kara?
Right now there's not. So yeah, if you want to continue on, and folks, just as a reminder, you can enter any questions in the chat or Q&A, and we'll field those after the presentation to John.
Very good. All right, thank you very much. We'll continue along. So back to the presentation. How did the Thankathon go? For all intents and purposes, it went very well. So here's how it rolled out. At 8 a.m., we sent Valentine's Day themed e-cards to 2,661 donors for whom we had email addresses on file and who had given to our organization in 10 years, over the past 10 years. The e-card was produced and distributed using a program called Greenvelope. It's a digital greeting card resource for which Dmrf has an annual subscription. We really like Greenvelope because it's kind of interactive. Once you open the email, there's an envelope that you can click. And once you click, it kind of like pulls the envelope, the invitation or the card out of the envelope and flips it around with a little bit of animation. I wasn't able to show you for this, but I will show you the e-card in a little bit. So the e-card had just a short little message of appreciation, and it linked to the new donor appreciation video that we posted on our website. The video featured a variety of students and researchers and board members, all conveying special messages of appreciation to our donors. So we had a 43% open rate and a 12% click-through rate, and traffic to our website spiked by 300% within the first 24 hours. At the time, Dmrf was more than a year away from sending its first e-newsletter, so our donors really weren't accustomed to hearing from us at all in this capacity. Needless to say, we were very encouraged by these results. One longtime donor replied pretty much immediately and said, "I loved the video. You've got me forever." Like that made us feel pretty darn good. So yeah, electronic communications really weren't the norm for Dmrf at that time. So of course there were a lot of bounce backs, and that was to be expected because we just didn't send out a lot of messages. If we did, it was usually about a localized event. And frankly, a lot of those were in the Halifax region. We have a lot of donors outside of Halifax region. So it was definitely a worthwhile initiative. Next up, here is what the e-card looked like. And I've talked a fair amount about that video, so I'd like to pause for a moment and show you what the video looked like. It'll just take a moment for that to open up here on the screen, and fingers crossed that it works.
We're in our 40th year since establishment. The reason why the foundation exists is based on the pioneering and visionary efforts of private citizens who really knew how important medical research was to the wellness of the community.
I'm incredibly grateful to the Dmrf donors for their willingness to fund this incredibly important research.
It's important to have people from the community have interest and want to invest in the research that we do.
Everyone who is involved in science or appreciates science should be a donor to the Dmrf.
The funding that we've received here has helped us to secure personnel for the lab, as well as be able to purchase equipment that we wouldn't be able to purchase otherwise that is important to advance our research.
From the minute I arrived, Dmrf supported the equipment that set up my lab, has supported students in my lab, it's supported operating money.
I love medical research because I love to help people with problems and make their life better.
I'm also a donor to Dmrf because I appreciate what they can do for medical research at Dalhousie.
It provides us an opportunity to bring in experts from around the world to help educate us in the area of pediatric cardiology.
Your support is changing lives.
Without you, we wouldn't be having the impact that we're having in terms of advancing medical and health research in Atlantic Canada.
Your giving makes a big difference to medical research.
Your support makes a big difference and allows us to do things that we wouldn't otherwise been able to.
Your contributions to our research have made a huge impact.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for all your support.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, so that was our short little video, and like I said, it got got really good response for us, so we're really happy about that. The video was also pushed out via Dmrf's Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter accounts. The collective posts had a total social media reach of about 1,800, with 260 post engagements and 162 likes, clicks, comments, shares, and retweets. That really may not sound like that much, I acknowledge that completely, but our social media footprint was still relatively new at the time. It really helped us start to get off the ground, and we're really happy with the results. For phase 3, we identified 23 donor households and organizations to receive personalized videos. Many of the people who appeared in the personalized videos, such as Asal you see on the screen here, also appeared in the longer Thankathon video that was sent out to the donors. We would have loved to have done more, but whereas this was our first attempt at this kind of initiative, and we didn't have a ton of resources set aside for it, we were really selective about which donors we included. As I mentioned earlier, the recipients were not exclusively major gift prospects or donors with high lifetime giving totals. Some of them were, but other of them had made just one smaller gift. It really depended, but others were selected because of their recent support of certain initiatives that aligned with some of the key priorities that Dmrf was supporting at the time. The videos were sent out directly to the donors from our CEO, and it didn't go from a generic dummy account. It actually came from her email address, or his email address. We have a different CEO now. And it went out at 9 a.m. shortly after the mass donor email went out. One really high-profile donor replied to our CEO within a couple of minutes and said, "This is very powerful and well done." So that was helpful. We got a lot of feedback throughout the day on those videos as well. Of the 23, I think we heard back from about 2/3 of them, so that was great. As for the phone calls, we narrowed down our list of donors to 1,062 donor households with phone numbers on file. That's and a little over half of those donors included monthly donors, known planned gift expectancies, major gift donors, new donors within the past fiscal year, and donors who've been supporting Dmrf consistently over the past 5 years or more. Those calls were placed by our staff, our board, our researchers, and our student volunteers. And that, of course, included the dashing chap you see on the screen right now. Between 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. on Valentine's Day, 9 staff members and 13 volunteers all took shifts and placed calls to more than 600 donor households. The volunteers placed between 5 and 10 calls each, while staff placed between 19 and one person called 93 people. That was a busy day. We all really needed some water. But the calls were really short most of the time, so it really wasn't that difficult to get through them fairly quickly. We had some fun snacks available throughout the course of the day to keep everyone's morale up, and especially their energy levels up, including around lunchtime, we brought in some heart-shaped pizzas, just for fun. Direct connections were made with a little over half of the donors. By that, I mean a connected phone call. And we left messages for another 40% of them, over and above that. And there were a few personalized follow-up emails sent to some of them whose phone numbers we thought we had, but were actually invalid. So all said, in total, of the 600 people we called, 94% of them either heard from us directly or received a personal message that day. Many of the callers reported that the donors usually seemed surprised or kind of apprehensive, or frankly, just waiting for the other shoe to drop and expecting to be solicited. So some of them had their guard up from the first moment, but when they learned that the call was really just to thank them, they, generally speaking, were very pleased and surprised. One person said, "This is the best thing to happen today besides chocolate." So if we could be the second best thing that happened to them on Valentine's Day, that's great. Yeah. Now, between 6 and 8 p.m., that's when we had the Phonathon Center students call, and they placed an additional 450 calls, primarily to donors who had given in the previous fiscal year, but not yet in that fiscal year that was coming to its end on the 31st of March, so about 6 weeks later. Direct connections were made with about half of them, and messages were left for about another third. So 83% of the people that the students called either heard from our callers directly or received personal messages on Thankathon Day. The messages were just an adaptation of the regular script. It really was just, "Hi, I'm so-and-so calling on behalf of Dmrf. Sorry that I missed you, but I'm calling to thank you for your support of our organization. We really appreciate it. We wanted to let you know on Valentine's Day, we're thinking about you and we wish you a happy Valentine's Day." That's the general gist of both what the calls and what the messages sound like. Now, of course, we didn't hog all the snacks ourselves. We sent some heart-shaped pizza and beverages down to the student call center just to keep them fueled as they place their calls, and also to give them a bit of a change of pace. And that's actually one of the pieces of feedback that we received from the Phonathon Center was this was a nice change of pace for them because they're used to just calling and having to ask, whereas this was calling and relaying appreciation. So it was something that a lot of the callers enjoyed doing. One of the pieces of feedback we received from one of the recipients of the calls was, "This is so great. I'm not used to just getting a call to say thanks." So, you know, some of them really seem to appreciate the intention behind the initiative. All right, let's talk results. You know, when you're doing your treat XML submissions and you have to think about quantitative and qualitative. Well, that's what we tried to think about with this one as well. So in terms of quantitative results, there were 3,520 donors who received a Thankathon communication on Thankathon Day. Now that includes email, phone calls, and or the personalized videos. Some received one, some received both, some received all three. The phone calls resulted in direct conversations with more than 500 of the donors that we called, and we either spoke with or successfully left messages for 90% of the donors we called. That's between the Phonathon Center and with the Dmrf office calls. This is a small number, but 3% of those who received calls made another gift before the end of the fiscal year, 6 weeks later. So that's not a huge number, but that's still something. And a lot of those were those live bunts, the people who hadn't yet given that fiscal year. So that was great. And another 60% made another gift to Dmrf the next fiscal year. The goal that I identified earlier was 25% because frankly, I didn't know what it was when planning this event. That was one shortcoming, is I didn't really know. I just made an assumption. So that was an error on my part, but just to know that 60% gave again, that was great. We believe this initiative had an impact on our overall retention that year, which is usually about 45%, but I'll talk more about that in a little bit. Although we were really pleased with the quantitative results, we feel the real impact of this initiative was in the qualitative results. Our primary objective, of course, was to make our donors feel appreciated without requesting any additional support. And the feedback we received is evidence that the initiative was at least somewhat effective. This is evidenced by the fact that, well, when we had our callers making the calls, we had them check off on the call sheet if the donor sounded pleased or indifferent or angry. So basically just to kind of give us a general idea of how the call was received. 84% of the donors we spoke with seemed pleased or very pleased to receive this communication on Thankathon Day. And we suspect that a big part of that is because there was no associated financial ask. That came up again and again and again. Additionally, the opportunity to engage our board members and our researchers and our students and staff was really valuable. One researcher commented, "It felt so good doing this, as I don't often get the chance to show my appreciation directly to the donors. These gifts are what keep many of us going when government funding dries up. It's donors like these that give me hope." Like this is from a cardiac researcher who's got lots of other things to do, but he was able to take half an hour out of his day to help us with this initiative, and he thanked us for doing it. So that, that really hit home for me. So engaging ambassadors for DMRF is an integral way in which we can spread the word about our organization and the amazing health research taking place in our backyard. So what did it cost? Focus first on the left, if you don't mind, which is the estimated costs. Our budget was $1,000, which was intended to cover the long distance charges, refreshments for the callers, and hiring the Phonathon Center and boosting a couple of our social media posts. The creative for those ads was handled in-house. We didn't do anything high tech. There was no fancy ad design or anything like that. It was pretty rudimentary. Now, apparently I have no idea what it actually costs for long distance calls nowadays. I think I might be stuck in the 80s because when mom was like, don't make long distance calls until after 6 p.m. My estimate was off by a long shot. A nice surprise was Dalhousie's Office of Advancement, who runs the Phonathon Center, deemed this initiative worthwhile, and they saw the benefit to the university. So they waived the fee, which was just fantastic. We were expecting to have to spend $400 on it, and they waived it for us. Everything else was pretty much spot on, but I have to say there's one caveat, and that's a big one, and that's the video production, because you see on the line there, 0. Fortunately, we have access to Dalhousie's Med IT department, and that's the group that handles audio-visual for the Faculty of Medicine. They created our 2-minute donor appreciation video and several of the personalized videos that were sent to some of the donors free of charge. The rest of the personalized videos were produced by the students using their own mobile devices. And really, without this, the budget would have been a lot higher. So we were really lucky. So when I say that it was only supposed to cost $1,000, that was keeping in mind that the videos were going to be free. But in total, we came in way under budget, and the total cost of the Thankathon was just $280.52. And that's with tax included. And of course, as a charitable organization, we get some of the HST back. So it was probably even less than that. Now, one other big thing that I'm going to say, one other caveat, is that we fully acknowledge that staff time comes at a cost. I estimate that over the 6 months leading up to this event, I probably put in about 70 hours to coordinate this event, and roughly 30 hours of staff time were spent placing Thankathon calls. So, that wasn't free, but it was part of my workload and didn't really prevent me from doing the other major roles and responsibilities. So that's budget. Let's talk challenges. Naturally, we encountered a few challenges along the way. First of all, we were still 6 months away from switching to a new database and hiring our new information services officer. And really, reports coming from our old database were really difficult to generate and really difficult to manipulate. We used a program called GiftWorks at the time. Even now, almost 2 years later, we're still trying to get stuff out of that old database and into our new one. This resulted in a Herculean effort to compile the final list of donors to receive phone calls, and inputting results into the database for the purpose of tracking this initiative was really tedious. So that was a big challenge. And as with many philanthropic organizations, Dmrf is missing contact information for many of its donors, big one being email addresses. We're attempting to improve the quantity and quality of the data in our donor records, but obviously it takes a lot of time, a lot of energy, and a lot of resources. On the bright side, more than 100 edits to our donor contact information in the database came as a result of the Thankathon. I will tell you that there were 3 people who our callers reported as sounding angry and or hung up because they thought they were being solicited for additional gifts. So I either personally called or mailed letters to all 3 of them to contextualize the call they'd received. Since then, 2 of the 3 have given again. The 3rd was a first-time donor, and I mean, that's not to say they're not important. Of course, they're important. But clearly there was a bee in the bonnet, I guess. And, you know, not everyone wants to get a call, so you can't win all. But the other 2 have been retained and they seem pleased, so that's good. Now, lastly, whereas the Thankathon was strictly a donor relations initiative with no fundraising component, a concrete return on investment for this initiative is really hard to pinpoint. The process of measuring how the Thankathon has impacted donor retention and repeat giving is an inexact science, because it's really difficult to tell how many of the donors we called would have given again anyway, regardless of the Thankathon, how many might have given more if they wouldn't have gotten a call, how many might have given less or not at all. We just don't know. Regardless, in terms of engaging with and generating goodwill among a large number of our donors over a very short period of time in a way that we'd never tried before, our quantitative and qualitative data suggests the Thankathon was time and money very well spent, to the extent that, as I hinted to earlier, we repeated it again in 2020, before the pandemic happened, because that was in February. So I'll talk a little bit about Thankathon 2020, but this presentation really was about 2019. We did implement a few changes the next year. In particular, we were able to improve our data reporting processes thanks to the new database and the new data guide. That significantly reduced the administrative work and staff time spent on this initiative. We also made some minor adjustments to the script based on caller feedback, and we were more purposeful in terms of who was assigned to call whom. So by that, I mean that if we had a longtime donor who had supported Alzheimer's research recently, we tried to have a researcher in that area call that donor. Or if we'd had somebody who'd been giving for 30 years, we tried to get a senior leader or member of our board to place that call, just to add some extra cachet. I mean, getting a call from me is nice, but getting a call from the dean's pretty cool. Our e-card open rate jumped significantly in year 2. We doubled our social media reach. We sent twice as many personalized videos, over 50 of them. We engaged 3 times as many researchers to help with the calling. Our calling results were pretty similar, and we were able to trim the budget just a little bit more, which was great. Now, because Valentine's Day was on a Sunday this year, and because we're all still working remotely due to the pandemic, we decided to change things up this year, and we're still doing the Thankathon. It'll be in June, but it will be, like I said, a different time of year, and we're doing it in a different way. We really did miss calling our donors on Valentine's Day, but we hope they'll enjoy what we have in store for them. Lastly, please pardon the humble brag here, but the reason why I was asked to prepare this presentation is because we nominated the 2019 Thankathon for a CCAE Prix d'Excellence, and we received the Bronze Award in the Best Donor Relations Initiative category in 2020. It felt great, and it was a feather in our cap. So to quote the A-team here, you know, I love it when a plan comes together. We're really happy with how the Thankathon rolled out. So in terms of parting advice, I'd just like to say that we didn't reinvent the wheel with the Thankathon, nor did we really feel the need to. I'm sure lots of places do these kinds of initiatives. Some of you probably do it even better. And there are things we could have done differently. What matters is that you do something and you put your own personal spin on trying to engage your donors and to make them feel special. Nobody knows your donors better than you, so just, you know, put your own spin on it. It's also important to try to build a culture of gratitude among your staff, board members, and funding recipients. Let me tell you, I received a lot of pushback from some of the people I asked to help with the Thankathon. Some of the staff flat out refused, some of the board members ignored the asks, and some of them I kind of had to drag along kicking and screaming. However, when some of the folks who had resisted it saw the results, pretty much everyone acknowledged the value of this kind of initiative. and offer to assist with it and other donor relations initiatives in the future. So proof in the pudding there, I think. And finally, get over your fear of the phone. Nowadays, people avoid placing phone calls at all costs. Some because they think people won't answer or will respond with hostility if they do. And others just don't like calling strangers. I'm here to tell you that your donors are members of your family, and not everyone is allergic to receiving an old school phone call. In fact, some of them actually appreciate it. And I'll say it one more time, especially when you don't include a task. You just pick up the phone, give them a call, and just say, hey, thanks, received your gift, want you to know we really appreciate it. That's all you need to do. I do that on a regular basis, on a monthly basis, actually. I call our new donors, and a lot of them are expecting the next ask or what. But when it's just a straight call to say thanks, I mean, our retention numbers are climbing. It's working. So that's all from me. Thanks very much to CCAE for inviting me to tell you about the Dmrf Thankathon. I'd be happy to try and entertain any questions you might have. I'll do my best. And my email address is on the screen if you'd like to contact me separately. And that's the end. Kara, back over to you.
Thanks so much, John. That was such a great presentation, and it sounds like you're definitely creating that culture of philanthropy, you know, not only with your donors, but within Dmrf. And it's just a wonderful thing to hear when those volunteers are so happy to do these calls. We do have a few questions. The first one is from Megan, and she asks, when donors made the gift 6 weeks after the Thankathon, was that something they initiated, or did you call them or send an appeal?
No, it was just something they initiated. We sent nothing after the event specific to the Thankathon. That was just stuff that came in. What I did was I, tracked who received a call and ran a report probably about 2 months later, just to see if anybody gave again before the end of the fiscal year. And that's where the 3% came in. So again, it was a modest number, but it's not like we made a concerted effort to ask. Maybe something we could. Never know.
Yeah, right on. So they thasked you then. That's great.
Yes. Yeah.
And there's another one from Catherine who wants to know what's the cost for I think it was the green envelope or the e-card software that you have in place?
I don't know. Our communications and marketing team covers that. We have an annual subscription. So we didn't buy it just for that reason. If Catherine wants to send me an email, I'd be more than happy to look into that for her. That's no problem.
Perfect. All right. Catherine, feel free to do that. And if you don't want to email John directly, you can certainly do so by emailing us at admin@CCA Canada. And then another question came in from Hannah. And she asked, do you know how much that video would have cost if you had not done it in-house or received it in kind?
Basically, we work with another videographer, so not with the Med-IT. He does cut us a sweetheart deal on things, but I suspect that if he would have created that video and had done the number of personalized videos that the Med-IT team did for us, I suspect it probably would have cost about $1,500. That's my guess.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's really good value. We're really lucky to have them, and they're not always available. But if it's an initiative that benefits the university, often we are granted access.
Right on.
And they're great to work with. They're lovely.
Great to hear. And the last question is a two-parter from Paige, and she wants to know, how do you plan to implement your Thankathon for 2021 with pandemic restrictions if restrictions don't allow you to bring in volunteers? And are you scheduling those volunteers individually or sharing donor call information with them offsite? That
is the million-dollar question. We're still working on that right now. So it's something that we're looking at implementing for June. And the Thankathon, frankly, it will likely have to be implemented over the course of a few days, not just one day. We may be able to use our space, not in the same way that we did before when we had a bank of about 12 people calling at once. That just won't be possible in the space that we have. We're also not cleared to go back to the office to work on a regular basis. But I do suspect that with whatever, however this does come together, we'll probably still try to do it in a centralized location, just spread out over the course of numerous days, just to try to keep people safe. One of the key things is, even though there are volunteers and we love them, giving out the private contact information, that can violate some privacy considerations. So we're really not comfortable just emailing that to people. We'd rather keep the information in-house.
For sure, for sure. So maybe a follow-up e-learning session this fall, and we can see how it goes. And we did actually just get a couple more questions in. Another one from Tara. What are you planning to do differently this year for the 2021 rollout?
Well, it's definitely going to have to look a lot different because of it not being all on one day, not being on Valentine's Day. Our video, while it didn't really necessarily have a Valentine's theme, it did have a, it did have a central theme that we're probably going to have to tweak based on it being more of a summertime thing anyway. So we're still working on that. I'd hope to be further along right now, but of course we'd all hoped that by now we'd be back to normal, as opposed to now officially 1 year working out of the office. So we're still working on it. I don't have a really good answer for you there of what we're going to be doing differently. I do have now our community engagement officer, and she is incredibly keen, and she's got a lot of great ideas. So she and I are collaborating on this one to bring together a cool initiative, hopefully something we can submit for another Prix d'Excellence and maybe do another follow-up learning session for you in the future.
Oh, absolutely. And so the last question that I have here is, and I apologize if I pronounce your name wrong, but I believe it's Naya. And she would like to know, how much lead time did you allow for the video production?
That video came together really fast. It actually, we asked people before Christmas, the ones who were in the video, and we filmed it on, I believe it was January 11th, and it was produced in time for February 14th. So that was just the first year. For the second year, we did a similar video. That was all filmed before the holidays. We needed to give the MedIT team a lot more time there because that just wasn't fair. It's just how it came together the first time. We just didn't know how it was going to roll out. Holidays got in the way, etc. But yeah, it was put together in less than a month.
Wow. Very, very good. We're about to do some videos coming for CCA, and I know we're doing it 2 or 3 months. So that, is quite the effort you guys did. Really, really great time. And so with that, I don't see any more questions. Again, if folks have questions, feel free to email John directly, or again, the CCA office at admin@ccacanada.org, and we'll field those to him after this. So I just want to thank you once again so much, John, and to everyone who attended today for this fantastic session. This is the last e-learning session of the spring timeframe for CCA. We will pick it up again in the fall. But in the meantime, I would encourage everyone to check out the resource hub section on the website. We do post this session and all past e-learning sessions there if you want to review or catch up on the learning. And yeah, thanks so much again. And with that, I'll say bye to everyone and wishing you a lovely remainder of the week.